Welcome to Women's Health Unwrapped with Nicola Farndell, a weekly show dedicated to empowering women to unlock the secrets of true health and vitality. Join us as we unwrap what healthy living really means with guest experts and real-life stories to help you get clear on the power of building sustainable, healthy habits without the overwhelm and confusion you feel right now. It's time to strip back and lay out the truth about why taking better care of yourself is the answer to the happy, vibrant life you're striving so hard to create. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Women's Health Unwrapped. I'm so pleased that you're tuning in, and if you are a regular listener, welcome back. Thanks for supporting the podcast. And if you're a brand new listener, then welcome. It's great to have you choosing me to listen to in your ears, whatever it is you're doing today, whether it's taking a walk, maybe you're in the kitchen busy preparing a meal, or perhaps you're just having a bit of a moment to yourself, which I'm all for that, of course. So today I want to chat to you about why menopause doesn't have to feel like the end of the road. In fact, believe it or not, menopause can be the beginning of a brand new chapter in your life. You know, for so many women, this phase, this season of life can feel really daunting and actually quite terrifying. We're told that menopause is something to dread. You know, it's a sign that we're over the hill. It's the beginning of the decline into old age and the beginning of the end of our lives. And because of how we've been brought up, certainly if I would say you're over 40, probably even over maybe 30, and you're listening thinking, you know, my mum, my grandmother, my aunts, the other women in my life really made me believe that menopause is just the most awful of times. And, you know, it's when you can lose yourself, lose your confidence, lose your body, because we're all taught about that. And we just think it's going to be this really big negative part of our lives that changes things for the worse forever. But I'm here today, and I hope you're listening in today to find out why that couldn't be further from the truth. Because today I want to challenge this narrative. Menopause is not a period of decline. I think a lot of women are starting to realise this, but it's definitely still the minority in a percentage terms. But it's a great thing that we are starting to realise is that menopause is an opportunity to rediscover yourself. And importantly, to redefine or actually discover maybe for the first time in your life what matters to you and create the best second act, the best second half, whichever way you think of it, of your life. And yes, there are real challenges that can come with menopause and things that for some women can be quite debilitating that do need to be navigated and dealt with and get the right support for. But it's also a really powerful turning point. Now, it's said that globally there's going to be 1.2 billion postmenopausal women after 2030. And the way the clock's ticking, we're reaching that point in time very, very quickly. And that every year, 25 million women will be reaching menopause every year from 2030 onwards, which is just staggering. For almost every single one of us born female, we are going to go through menopause. We can't avoid it. It's going to happen. So, you know, the narrative around it has been, like I say, this negative story. And a reality check is that there are lots of things we see happening at this midlife point, which coincide most likely with perimenopause and menopause for many women. Things like divorce rates being highest among women between the ages of 40 to 49, and the greater percentage of divorces in women over the age of 45 are actually instigated, so they're petitioned by women. And we know that this is probably linked to those hormonal changes that can intensify emotions and perhaps lead to relationship difficulties. This is what we automatically think because we've been led to believe this. Suicide rates
are sadly highest among women aged 45 to 54, which is a heartbreaking reality. And, there must be a link to some of those profound physical, emotional, and mental changes that accompany menopause. And only really very recently are we starting to understand some of those psychological changes that are happening because of our hormonal fluctuations. And we've got the brilliant Lisa Mosconi, who's written a book on the menopausal brain, and she's doing lots of very, very much needed research into how our brains change as we go through menopause, that we can start to understand more of those, really significant emotional and mental changes that are taking place in how we feel because of the psychological things that are actually happening in our brain, those physiological changes. We know that careers are massively impacted. There was a study from the Fawcett Society in the UK that found 10% of women between 45 and 55 have left their jobs due to menopausal symptoms. We've seen statistics shared of around 1 million women having already left their jobs or the workplace completely because of menopause. And I hear this a lot. I've spoke to many people on my podcast previously who've shared that they knew at the time they were struggling in their job and career because of menopause, or perhaps it's only after having to leave and change the way they were working and learn about perimenopause and menopause that on reflection they can look back and realise the difficulties they were experiencing were menopausal related. So, those statistics do paint quite a stark picture, really. There's, as I say, lots of negative things we've been led to believe happen because of menopause, and some of those things, or all of those things, are real. They are happening. Women are divorcing in bigger numbers at that age range. Suicide rates are higher at that age range. We are seeing careers and working abilities being affected. And I do some work with corporates on this because it's really important that organisations are better aware of the struggles that women are facing. So if you're listening now and you feel lost, overwhelmed and stuck, I want you to know that you are not alone, because I'm not trying to paint a picture that menopause is a rainbow, that it's this great opportunity and point in your life when things magically can be transformed. Menopause can be a turbulent time, physically, emotionally, and mentally, but just because the statistics are quite dark and grim, doesn't mean that your story has to be. And this is what I really would love you to take away from what I'm sharing in today's episode. It's about reframing menopause. Like anything in our lives and any experience we have, how we interpret and process that experience and event determines how we feel about that event, how we create a story of it. So there are lots of examples of this in different research where they talk about siblings, for example, who have gone through the same life event, for example, losing a parent in quite a tragic circumstance, and the kids being there when that event happened. But what each of those siblings has processed and interpreted is actually quite different. And there's one case in particular that I've got in my mind that I remember hearing about, where it was only many, many, many years later when one of those siblings was writing a book and started to dig into that event to include it in the book that she was writing. And she had a conversation with her sibling and realised that they both had very different memories and therefore a very different impact from the event because of how they'd seen it, thought about it, processed it, interpreted, and stored that as a memory and something that then was obviously playing out in how they felt. So we do have a choice, regardless of whether our symptoms are minimal and mean that we can breathe through menopause, which I'm sure you've heard women talk about, or whether they're quite difficult and widespread so that you do have more challenges to deal with, we still have a choice in how we support ourselves and how we process what it is we're going through. So I want you to know that menopause is not the end of your life. It's not the beginning of the end. It also doesn't have to feel like it's the beginning of a decline into old age. Think about it as the start of something new. In Japan, for example, and in other Eastern cultures, it's thought of as the second spring. It's for many women a time in their lives where they can finally focus on themselves without perhaps some of those pressures they've carried for decades. And yes, for some women, reaching the end of your reproductive years can in itself feel quite sad and daunting. I definitely have a memory of my mum talking about how she felt quite sad to know that she would never be able to get pregnant and carry a baby again, even though she was, what I considered to be well past those years of being able to have a child. And she said, yeah, it's not that I would want another child, but I just feel something quite sad knowing that it's not a possibility at all anymore. So lots of women do encounter those kinds of thoughts, but this is where your mindset is really critical to help you process it in a more positive way so that you can reframe menopause as a time of renewal and rebirth rather than a time of decline and negativity. Now, I've spoke to quite a lot of women who have found new careers, and I'm going to talk about this crossroad in midlife. And also, let's just kind of define what midlife is, because I think midlife is a term that we're definitely seeing a lot more, and I'm using it much more in my marketing and in the work that I do, because I think it's a point that's much more easy to relate to. Like menopause feels like it's a thing, and that it's very much linked to your periods and your menstrual cycle and those symptoms. Whereas I think midlife's more of a stage and a time where you can um reevaluate like where you are and what you would like for yourself for the rest of your life. And I'm 48, and I would love to think that I'd love to think I'm actually just before midlife, because my goal is to reach 100 plus if I can. But the reality is I could be way past my midlife, and that's quite a scary thought. But also, as I want to share a little bit in a few minutes or so with you about my story, it's very empowering to think about midlife for lots of reasons. And I wanted to start with sharing about some of the women I've chatted with who've taken this midlife point to think about where they're at and the fact that actually they're not somewhere where they really wanted to be. If they look back to perhaps when they were teenagers or early 20s, looking forward to their life, they've just ended up on a path by default, and they're working in a job that they don't really like. Perhaps their career isn't something they ever envisioned for themselves, and they've been ticking along and doing their job, but have realised this is not where they want to be in their life. And so they're looking at the fact that they are midlife and kind of using that as a catalyst to go, it's now or never. I'm going to change my career. I want to start a business. I want to pursue a passion that has been lost somewhere through my adult life, perhaps through the journey of motherhood and putting your children and your family first. And I've spoken to quite a lot of these women who have shared their stories about, rediscovering who they really are. There's one woman I know who had always wanted to start her own business, but just did not have the courage or time at all until she was kind of forced through a menopause to step away from the very successful career that she'd built. And she saw that at the time as something that was a failure. It really impacted her confidence. It actually led to her having an episode of burnout. But she then embraced it as an opportunity to redefine herself and what she wanted and set that business up So she now has an Etsy store. She makes beautiful jewelry. And, this was something that she just didn't have the courage to previously do until she experienced those changes of menopause and realized that she did need to do something different to fulfill herself more. Another woman that I've spoken with decided to pick up a hobby. And this is a big thing that I see with clients as well, is they're reaching this point in their life at this midlife crossroads where they're looking forward thinking, what am I going to do to make it different? Because right now I feel lost, I feel stuck, I feel overwhelmed, I feel like I'm just in survival mode and that I'm not really doing anything or very much that fills me up in the way that I want to. And it's, a chance to take a bit of a deep dive into what you do enjoy and actually who are you as a person, what are your values? And for many of them, they want to pick up a new hobby, or I should say start a new hobby, or pick up a hobby that they had when they were much younger, but again, just lost because of how life played out. And so one woman I spoke to picked up painting again after a very long break of doing it, I think to around maybe mid-20s or so, and then finding a partner, building a career, having a family. And she's absolutely loving being able to, embrace that hobby that gave her so much joy when she was younger and knowing that it's giving her joy again at this point in her life. I do think for many women, there's a release from their monthly cycle, certainly if it's one that's been difficult with pain and PMS symptoms and so on. So, not having that monthly cycle can help you to feel more free and able to live without those limits that perhaps, days or a week or so every month can bring to you. So I do think that that's quite an opportunity. And certainly for me, I am very much looking forward to not having my monthly bleed. So I wanted to share a little bit about the crossroads that I reached in my life. And if you are a regular listener and follower of me, then you probably know some of this already. I was 45 and I had struggled for 25 plus years with anxiety and panic. And I was the main earner in my family. I was in a career where I was classed as a pretty high performer. I was contributing well to the business and, I was doing a job that I was good at. And in some respects, I enjoyed it. However, I found the whole corporate setting and the way that work was for the company I worked for very, very stressful. The demands that were there, both from a cultural perspective of how we were as a team, being the person I was with that anxiety and panic, as well as just the pressure of the job and what some of the expectations within that role were, for example, in presenting and public speaking, made me literally live in fear. So I wasn't in a good place. And at this point, we were in the pandemic and I was dreading that return to normal when the pandemic was over. And then redundancy came about. So I was literally standing at a major crossroads in my life. I'd never faced a crossroads like this. And I had this moment of realization where it dawned on me that I couldn't continue as things were. And it was kind of, wondering, is this it? Is this all there is? And I was still grieving. I'd lost my mum only months before the pandemic started. So this was a year and a half after losing my mum. And I'd been through a few other things in my life at that point as well. I'd had a really bad accident. I had some challenges in my relationship and some other family problems and so on. And I just felt lost and had no idea where to go. But I had this almost aha moment of realizing that if I didn't make a change at this point, and the redundancy was what was pushing me to think, yeah, I can make a change, then things weren't going to get any better. I knew that I had to create a new path for myself. And I had this realization that the redundancy was happening for me, not to me. So I really started to focus on what mattered to me. And I was struggling actually when I was made redundancy. I'd recently been to see or had a call with the doctor because we weren't able to have face-to-face visits. And I'd said, I really think something's changing. I think it's my hormones. maybe I'm menopausal. I didn't know the word perimenopause at this point. Yeah, only 3.5 years ago, I didn't know that word. And I think many of us women have only just started to understand, well, actually hear the word recently and begin to understand what it means. And the doctor said to me, don't be stupid. Women always blame the hormones. It's not your hormones. It's just life. You're depressed. You're anxious. I didn't actually feel depressed. I felt stressed and I felt worried. But the way I lived, I knew I wasn't really depressed. And so I got some pills and took the antidepressants, and realised within 3 months or so that I didn't need them. But what happened when I was made redundant was that I saw this crossroads and chose to take a path that felt right for me. And that was the first time in my life. Well, actually, I think the first time since I was 21 and chose to go and work as cabin crew, which was something I really wanted to do. This was the first time that I really felt an empowerment to carve out what was to come next. It wasn't just about the job, it was about everything. It was, working out what really mattered to me, realizing how important my health was, discovering what I was passionate about and what my purpose was. And that all led me to create Life Now coaching. And then this podcast was born from setting up the business. And I was someone who dreaded going into menopause because I believed it was going to be hellish. I really believed, because of my mental health challenges and the struggles I'd had with depression on and off since being a teenager, also with my weight, I viewed menopause as something that was probably going to tip me over the edge. And my ex used to reinforce this often, which made me believe it even more. It was like, you're going to be a nightmare when you hit menopause. You're going to hate it. And so I had all kinds of stuff in my head about menopause. And, there was no thoughts in there about I can redesign my life and I can live it in a way that fulfills me. That's what happened. Took the redundancy as a crossroads to choose which path to take next in life, instead of just falling onto whatever path came up in front of me, like I'd always done. And this is what led me to build my self-worth, my self-belief, my confidence, and then qualifying as a PT, certifying as a health coach. I started my business and I got comfortable with being uncomfortable in many ways. And then I ended my marriage because I realized I didn't deserve or want to stay in a relationship where I felt unappreciated and not respected. And I started a new relationship because I finally was my true, authentic self. And I found someone who loved me for being truly myself. And I believe that's because I realized I was at a crossroads. At the time, I didn't necessarily view it as the menopause and midlife and so on. But that's what I want you to think about, because the way we think about menopause can completely change how we experience it. And it does all begin with mindset. Mindset sits right in the center of my 5 pillars of wellness: mindset, movement, nutrition, sleep, and stress, because mindset is absolutely at the core of building strong health and well-being, which lead to you having that strong self-worth, strong self-belief, strong self-esteem, and to realize you need to value yourself. So when you see menopause and midlife as an opportunity to transform rather than the start of the end of the road, you're going to empower yourself to make choices that are in alignment with who you are now, not who you used to be. Okay, so you're probably saying, right, Nicola, this all sounds great, and yep, it's worked out for you, and yep, I've seen some of these celebrities who are talking about making big changes in their life, but it's always easy for you because, well, you know what to do, or maybe the celebrities because, well, they've got loads of time on their hands and they can pay for help and so on and so on. I want you to stop right there and realize, first of all, that those kind of thoughts are the thoughts that are going to determine your midlife menopause experience in a way that possibly is going to make it negative, and not open up that crossroads with a great, brilliant path as one of the options that you take from it. So how do you shift your mindset? Just a few tips to get going. But if you do want more tips on this and more tips to help you better navigate perimenopause, if you haven't already downloaded my free guide, I would love you to check it out. It has 10 fantastic tips to support you through perimenopause. And many of the tips in there are really going to help with what we're talking about today in terms of reframing menopause and knowing that you are reaching a crossroads in your life, whether you're late 30s, whether you're mid 40s, whether you're late 40s, early 50s. You're still at this point in life where you can consciously choose to take the path that you really want to take rather than just keep going as you are and not getting the most from life and being, most importantly, who you really are. So if you haven't downloaded the guide, there is a link in the episode show notes, but you go to lifenowcoaching.uk/feel good again, because I know so many women struggle to feel good, and you just think, I want to feel good again. I want to just feel like I can get up and get through the day without being overwhelmed with these symptoms and the stuff that's going on in my head. So download that guide and use the link in the notes if you want to get there quickly. So the first tip is around gratitude practicing. And I really want you to think about how you can use this very powerful tool to switch your mind into a positive place. Because one of the great things to remember is that fear, doubt, anxiety can't exist in the same space as gratitude. That's a human biological fact. So when you are practicing gratitude, you're making no room for those negative thoughts. So think about how you could do something daily. Maybe it's at the end of the day in bed, thinking about what you're grateful for. Perhaps it's over the evening meal with your family. Perhaps it's journaling. There's so many different ways to do it. But try to find a way every day to create a new habit of gratitude. Think about affirmations as well, which aren't all woo-woo. This is all proven. There's so much research about the power of affirmations as well, especially in sport, in the world that I came from at Nike. Think about how you can use affirmations to support and promote self-love and acceptance during menopause. So it could be something like, I am embracing menopause as a new beginning for me to create a brilliant second half. And it's always said as within that format of I am or it is now. So, I am living my life in a way that is true to who I am. And maybe you think, well, I'm not right now, I'm trying to, but that's fine. Because when you affirm it as it is, so like it is already done, that is helping you to then shift to make that your reality. And journaling is a great way to support yourself, not just with the gratitude practice or affirmations, but to get things out of your mind as well, and put it down on paper or maybe type it up if you prefer. I certainly like to type things, but sometimes I do write it down. Like what are 3 things you want to accomplish in the rest of your life? What is the big thing that if you could do would really help you to look back at the end of your life and go, it was fantastic that I achieved that thing. So look at, whether you can use journaling to help you build that gratitude, build that clarity around what you want for the rest of your life, and focus on not what you're losing, but on what you can gain from your second act. Really take time to, get clear on what matters to you. I think that is the key thing I want you to take away from this episode. What do you enjoy? What have you always wanted to do but never had the chance? What have you maybe secretly, perhaps even not realised yourself, begrudged by perhaps having to prioritise your kids and the family? What is a thing really deep within you that would just bring so much happiness and joy if you could do it? Think about that self-reflection, like what matters to you. And then start small with all of these tips. It's about carving out a little bit of time each day to begin with, and it might be as small as 2 minutes. And that works, making it really small so that you can step by step build this new practice into your lifestyle as a habit, and it becomes who you are. So don't overwhelm yourself thinking, Nicola said, I've got to look at this crossroads and create a fantastic second half and reframe menopause. Right, I'm going to do it all. That's the goal, but you're going to do it by one small change followed by another small step to create that lasting change. So let that excite you. Know that it's easy, that it's simple, and get really action oriented with those small steps. So it's not about overhauling your whole life. It's just those incremental stages, incremental steps. And it can be one thing at a time, like prioritizing your health, exploring the new hobby, rethinking about your career path, maybe rethinking about your relationship. And I want to circle back to what I shared at the beginning with the reality of menopause around relationships and career and the mental health challenges. Especially when it comes to relationships, we can look at those stats and go, okay, well, that's really bad. So many women are getting divorced. There's lots of people separating. And of course, nobody enters a marriage thinking it's okay for at some point that marriage to end. But I think a lot of women are ending relationships in a positive way. And that certainly was my experience in my story. Because we're realizing that we are at this crossroads and that we do have this opportunity ahead to make changes because we have reached that midlife point. And rather than think about, as I said, menopause in that health sense of, well, I'm going to stop my periods and I'm going to have all of these difficult and impactful symptoms to deal with that are going to make life really tough. Think about instead that midlife point of, hey, get to decide what I do, because when I was younger, I didn't know what I wanted to do and I fell on this path. I maybe fell into a relationship. I wasn't experienced or educated with money and I made wrong choices and decisions that have cost literally along my journey so far. But now I have wisdom, I have experience, and I have self-assurance to go, well, I get to choose what happens next, and let that be the ignition beneath you that lights you up, that lifts you up, that empowers you to think about making your second half the beginning of a new journey, a chance to rewrite your story, to know that you're not losing yourself. You're evolving into a more powerful, authentic version of who you already are, the person you really are inside, who you can now get super connected to and challenge yourself to think, right, what's that one small step I can take today that's going to bring you closer to making your second act the best one. Make your second half the best half of your life because you are in control of it. You are the CEO of your life. And I want you to think about this. Your future self will thank you for stepping up, for getting intentional at this crossroads about which path you take next. I really hope that I've given you food to think about, inspired you, and helped you to think about menopause in that different light and why it doesn't have to feel like the end of the road. Yes, there may be symptoms to deal with. I'm dealing with them. I've had lots of changes, from small changes to some bigger changes, things that I'm working through, things that I'm giving myself support with the tools I already have in my toolkit with, but also things that I am getting new support with. That is part of it. But I'm okay with that because I know that I've started already to make changes based on what I want my second half to look like. And I certainly know I don't want to be looking at the end of the road. I want to be seeing a big long path in front of me that winds and changes direction, but that I'm choosing to be on that path. That's what really matters. So I hope this has been an episode you can take something away from. Think about those small steps to make some changes in your life to live a great second half. And as always, I would absolutely love you to leave a rating on whatever platform you're listening to me on. It really helps other women to find the podcast. The more ratings and reviews that I get and the more subscribers, the more people will get this podcast opened up to them and be able to be inspired and make changes to live a healthy, happy and strong life themselves. So take just a moment right now, hit subscribe if you're not already subscribed, leave me a rating, and remember to download your free guide with 10 tips to feel good again in perimenopause. Thank you so much for listening and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for joining today. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please remember to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. It would be massively appreciated if you could leave a rating and review to help other women discover the podcast and build their own healthy, happy life. If you're struggling with the changes perimenopause is bringing your way and you're ready to reclaim your vitality, to embrace this new chapter of your life with confidence and joy, then why not download our free guide, 10 Ways to Feel Good Again, your perimenopausal revival guide. Inside, you'll get 10 proven ways to enhance your well-being and rediscover the joy of living life to the fullest. And we all want to live a great life, don't we? So download your free guide now at lifenowcoaching.uk/feel good again. The link is in the show notes. You can follow Life Now Coaching on Instagram and LinkedIn and visit our website at lifenow.uk. All of the links are in the show description. I really hope you've enjoyed today's topic and conversation and can't wait to have you back again next week for more tips on living healthy and happy right now. Take care.